Okay, it's time to actually start weaving today. So we have our looms ready. Remember, these are our warp threads. And this is the back of our loom. This is the front. On the front where you're going to add your weaving, you should just see these stripes of yarn. You should not have the knots and all of that. This is going to be the back. All right. And so we have a variety of yarn to choose from. What I normally say is to get a piece, pull off a piece about 1 arm length or possibly 2 arm lengths. And so you can hold the end. I know it's hard for me to show this on camera here, the way that I am filming this. But if you think about your wingspan, that would be your arms outstretched. That's as long as you want to get. Otherwise, it gets a little bit too difficult. So I'm going to get not quite my wingspan. I'm kind of holding my arms out. I know you can't see. And so I'm going to cut this piece off. And then what I'm going to do is thread my needle. We have these plastic needles. And they have a pretty big eye, so this should not be too tough. And so I'm just going to put this through. If it's really fuzzy yarn, sometimes I fold the end to create a tiny loop and just kind of pinch it. And then that makes it a little bit easier to pull through. And I'm just going to let that sort of hang down right here. I'm not tying any knots. I'm just going to let that hang. And I might want to hold on to it right here just so the yarn doesn't keep falling out. All right, time to start weaving. So we want to think under, over, under, over, or over, under. And I'm right-handed, so it's easier for me to start at the right side and push through, but then I do have to come back the other way, so I can either come back this way or I can flip it if it's easier for me to do it that way. And so here, let's get started. So I'm going to go under this first. And these are, remember, these are weft. And the way we can remember that term is left and right. And left rhymes with weft. And so I'm going under, over, under, over, under, over. And then if you need to use your fingers to pick up some of those, totally fine. So I'm going to just pull this through. And this first one, you don't want to pull too hard, or you're going to just pull it right on through. So I am going to let this little piece hang out, probably about like this. And I'm just going to slide that really far up to the top. All right, time to come back the other way. And I'm just going to leave it like this. I could turn it over if I have an easier time weaving that direction, but I'm just going to leave it this way. Okay, so this one came out. I know that's hard to see because that's a similar color right here, but this one came out under this thread. So that means it has to go back this direction over. So it came out under, it goes over, over, under, over, under, over, under, and over. And you want to make sure if you have fuzzy strings here, you don't go through it. That's going to cause some problems. So I'm going to hold that down and make sure that's not happening. And so again, I'm pulling this gently through. And here's where we want to be careful. We don't want to pull this too tight. If you pull and your thread's pulling over, that's too tight. You want it to keep parallel. You want them to keep nice and straight. And then I'm just going to take my needle here, or you can take your fingers, and you can push that up nice and tight. Actually, I think my fingers work a little bit better. All right, so this one came out over. It's time to go under. But let's see what happens if I forget about that and I just start with over. Over, under, over, under, over. Or I got to sing the wrong thing there, didn't I? But let's see what happens. I wove that back and forth properly, but I forgot about my end here. So let's see what's going to happen as I pull. See, it pulled that one right out, didn't it? That's because it has to wrap around that end. So if that happens, no big deal. Just say, oh well, got to weave that one again. So I want to be careful because this has to wrap around the end. So if it came out under, it's got to wrap around the top. If it came out over, it's got to wrap around the bottom. So let's do that really quick. And you can see I'm using my fingers to kind of help there. And so you might get to where you're doing this pretty quickly, or you might have to be slow and careful. We are not in a race to see who gets to finish first. And so then we just keep going back and forth. Remember, if you make a mistake, this is super easy to fix. The main things that we don't want to have happen that's a little bit more difficult to fix is if you pull it too tight. It's hard once you've done a lot of tight weaving to loosen it up without kind of unweaving it first. So we're going to keep sort of snuggling it up to the yarn above it. And so I'm going to show you what happens if you run out. I should have cut this one a little bit shorter, but I'm going to cut it and we're going to pretend. So, snuggling that up, let's say that I'm going to actually slide my needle here. And let's say I've gotten to this point and I know I'm running out of yarn. Now the right way to do this is just to let's see if I can do one more so it becomes a little bit trickier, is to just let the yarn kind of run out and then we kind of tuck it in and hide those ends. Sometimes people feel a little more comfortable actually if they just tie their ends together. So either way is fine with me. But if you want, and also if I'm going to let this, well, let me show you how to tie first, and then I'm going to show you how to let it end. So just like if you're tying your shoe, you do that first little part before the bow, and then we do that same little part again to tie our knot. And then you could trim these ends, not all the way to the knot because then it'll come right out, but pretty close. So I'm going to cut this knot off really quick and show you the other way. So once my needles come out, because the needle cannot weave this anymore, it's too short. But what I can do is I can just weave it with my fingers. And let's see. And it's kind of best if it doesn't end like that on the end, so I'm going to kind of go back just and kind of tuck that in. So you're kind of trying to hide that end right there. And then I would just get a new piece of yarn. Remember to thread our needle, we just poke that through. If it won't poke through, if it's too fuzzy, fold it and pinch it, and then it will go through. And then I'm going to look at how, I'm going to actually, this is a cleaner end, so I'm going to start over there. You can see this bottom row started over, and so I'm just going to go under right here. And then if I'm starting in the middle like this, here's something else. If I've tied it onto the end, you can just keep weaving. But if I did it that way where I tucked it in, I am going to let this come through a little bit to where it's kind of right here. And then I'm going to be, and that way the end's not going to poke out. And then this one, you can see that really well because that's blue. That's under, so this goes over. And I just want to be really gentle so I don't just tug that right through since that end is loose. And then if I weave a few rows, that's going to be pretty stuck in there and it's not going to come out. And so I would just keep going back and forth. If it's cleanup time, then what we're going to do, I will let you know if it's okay to leave your needles in your weaving. If that's the case, we just tuck them in. We're again double checking our names are on the back, and then I'll tell you where to put them. If another class needs to use the needles, we're just going to slide those out, put them back. And if you have a long piece of yarn, you can just sort of wrap it around and then put this away, and we'll be ready to start weaving the next day.